You're in a conference room in Mayfair, London, thick carpet, mahogany walls, a view that looks like old money safety, and across the desk sits a man who doesn't smile, the head of security, a former FSB officer. He slides an employment contract toward you and the salary is triple what you're making now. The bonus structure is ridiculous. There's even a housing allowance for an apartment in Monaco, life-changing money. Then he turns to page 10, the NDA. Most NDAs are corporate hygiene. Don't leak client lists. Don't share internal documents. But this one reads like a curse. You can't discuss the principal's location, his health, who visits the house, or even the layout of the bedrooms. And if you violate it, the penalty isn't "we'll sue." It's immediate termination with prejudice. You sign anyway, thinking, how bad can it be? I'm just a personal assistant, not realizing you're not signing paperwork, you're signing away the right to tell the truth. And 3 years later, after the yachts, the paranoia, and the quiet architecture of fear, you finally understand what you actually agreed to. This is why he quit. You don't apply for these jobs on LinkedIn. You don't network. You don't upload a resume and wait for a callback. You get selected quietly because someone has already decided you're the right kind of person to disappear into someone else's life. Recruiters for the ultra-wealthy don't look for ambition. They look for liability management. They want competence, discretion, and above all, lack of attachments. No spouse, no kids, no roots. No one who will ask where you are. No one you'll be tempted to go home to. They don't say it like that, of course. They call it flexibility. But what they mean is nothing in your life should be strong enough to compete with theirs. They call it a family office, which sounds almost quaint. Rockefeller vibes, mahogany desks, polite checks signed in fountain pen. In reality, a Russian family office can feel like a private intelligence service that happens to own a fleet of cars. Everything is compartmentalized. Everyone has a role, and nobody is allowed to know more than they need to know, because knowledge is elite. The client, let's call him Vladimir, made his money in oil in the 90s, back when wealth was less a number and more a blood sport. He came up in a world where businessmen didn't get fired, they got removed. Where paranoia wasn't a personality trait, it was a survival strategy. He didn't live through that era by being nice. He lived through it by treating every human relationship like a potential breach. My first week, they handed me a phone. Not a normal phone, something sealed, pre-approved, treated like a weapon. The security chief didn't explain features, he explained consequences. Certain things were not to be written down. Certain things were not to be said near windows. If something mattered, you didn't send it. You carried it into the room and spoke it out loud, face to face, like confession. I asked why, still naive enough to think I was being dramatic for a rich person. He looked at me like I was a child who'd wandered onto a highway. Because trails, he said flatly, are for prosecutors. Then he added, almost casually, the line that finally made the job real. Assume you're listened to, assume you're followed, assume anything you leave behind can be used. That's when I understood what family office really meant. It wasn't an office, it was a perimeter. And I hadn't been hired to work inside it. I'd been hired to become part of it. The money seduces you at first. Private jets, chauffeur-driven cars, the best hotels, perfect meals, and wine that costs more than your annual salary poured on a Tuesday like it's tap water. But the longer you stay, the more you notice the rot under the lacquer. The paranoia doesn't arrive as a panic attack. It arrives as routine. It seeps into everything until fear becomes house policy. Vladimir is one of the richest people I've ever met, but he's trapped between two predators. One wears a tie, the other wears a flag. In the West, there are sanctions, seizures, frozen accounts, polite letters that turn your fortune into a museum exhibit you're no longer allowed to touch. In the East, there's the Kremlin, the faster kind of enforcement, the kind that doesn't come with paperwork, the kind that turns men into headlines and headlines into warnings. He lives inside a vice. He has to perform loyalty to Moscow to keep his assets, but he has to keep his money in London to keep it safe. That tension ruled our days. It dictated routes, phone calls, hotel rooms, seating charts. It taught you to treat convenience like a trap and strangers like threats. The moment that broke me was dinner. We were on the yacht off Sardinia. The chef prepared a spread so beautiful it was almost obscene. Vladimir sat down. He didn't eat, he didn't speak, he just looked at the head of security. The security chief took the first spoonful of soup like he was swallowing a bullet, then a bite of steak. Then he waited 5 long minutes while everyone stared at the table and pretended they weren't waiting to see if a body fails. The sea was calm, the air smelled like salt, and inside that floating palace, time slowed into something medieval. Then came the nod. Only then did Vladimir lift his fork. It wasn't theatrical, it was policy. Because at that altitude, your enemies don't need guns. They need access, a touch of powder, a smear on a rim, a molecule that turns luxury into a crime scene. We carried detectors on the boat. We checked for radiation like it was sunscreen. We lived with the quiet knowledge that the threat wasn't a burglar in the night. It was a dinner plate, served with a smile. That's the real cost of that kind of power. You can buy anything, except the ability to take a bite without thinking it might be your last. And then there was the clean room. In his London mansion inside the study, he'd built a glass box, an actual sealed cube, like an exhibit. A Faraday cage lined with copper mesh designed to choke the air of signals. No Wi-Fi, no cellular, no invisible hum connecting you to the outside world. Before a meeting, everyone dropped their phones into a basket outside like offerings at the door. Then you stepped into the glass and talked the way people talk when they believe the walls have ears. And you couldn't stop thinking, what kind of life produces conversations that need a physics-proof room? That's when you start to understand London differently. For men like this, it isn't a city. It's a filter, a place where wealth can be insulated, disguised, and made to look respectable, where money becomes assets, and assets become distance. Art, for example, isn't just decoration, it's mobility. A canvas can hold value quietly, travel easily, and sit out of sight for years in places designed for storage and secrecy. And then there's property. Vladimir bought houses across the most expensive parts of London, not to live in, but to anchor himself, keys scattered around the city like escape hatches. Because a brick house in Kensington feels more solid than a number in a Moscow account. When power turns, accounts can be frozen. People can be erased. But real estate just sits there, heavy and silent, pretending it's neutral. Winters were a ritual of frozen opulence. Courchevel 1850. The Alps as a private stage for people who treat weather like decor. Vladimir bought a 12-bedroom chalet so close to the main lift, it felt like a territorial claim. A 50 million euro block of timber and stone built to look rustic while operating like a bunker. He loved the mountains the way he loved everything, as an aesthetic. The cold, the white, the altitude, but he never skied. He didn't come for sport. He came to occupy the view. The height wasn't for fun, it was for dominance. Summer moved to a different fortress, the yacht. 120 meters long, staffed by 80 people whose lives were organized around his comfort. It felt less like a boat and more like a floating border checkpoint. Paranoia was baked into the design. Layers of security, anti-surveillance countermeasures, procedures for everything, as if the sea itself was hostile territory. Onboard life ran on a caste system that would have made a medieval court blush. Gold zones for the guests, blue zones for the help, with rules engineered to prevent the two worlds from ever truly touching. The directive for staff was not service. It was invisibility. If Vladimir walked down a corridor, you didn't just step aside. You turned and faced the wall. No eye contact, no presence. You weren't a person. You were an object that breathes, arranged to make power feel effortless. By the end of 2021, I already knew I wanted out. But February 24th, 2022 was the day everything truly changed. The day the invasion of Ukraine began. And the atmosphere inside the house wasn't the panic of war is terrible. It was the panic of the assets are going to be frozen. Vlad was on the list. Overnight, money stopped behaving like money. Credit cards declined. Suppliers called with voices that suddenly sounded official. We can't refuel you. Your accounts are flagged. The jet became a liability. Pilots refused routes because they knew what would happen if they touched down in the wrong airport. Impoundment, interrogation, headlines. The townhouse turned into a pressure cooker. Paper went into shredders. People stopped using names. The head of security barked into a phone in Russian like he was trying to outrun a net closing in. And that's when the thought hit me. Cold and unmistakable. If I stay here, I could go down with them. Leaving an oligarch isn't like leaving a normal job. You don't hand in notice. You don't get an exit interview. In a crisis, quitting doesn't read as resignation. It reads as betrayal. And betrayal makes people curious. Curious people start asking what you know, who you've spoken to, what you've seen, whether you're about to become a problem. So I didn't quit. I vanished. I left everything that connected me to them behind, and I walked out like a ghost, calm on the outside, shaking on the inside, because the only thing more dangerous than staying was making it look like I was running. Then came the part I still remember in my bones, days without real sleep, flinching at engines outside, watching every dark SUV like it was my sentence arriving early. I expected a call, a threat, a lawyer, something, but nothing came. Not because they forgave me, because they didn't notice. They were too busy trying to save their billions to worry about one assistant, and that was the final lesson of the whole job. I had been essential, right up until the moment I became irrelevant.